was a quiet, overcast evening when Sarah decided to visit the Windmere Asylum, located on the outskirts of town. The asylum had been abandoned for decades, but the rumors surrounding it never ceased. Stories of strange noises, ghostly sightings, and unexplained phenomena circulated like wildfire. Most people thought it was just an old building with a dark history. But to Sarah, there was something more, something pulling her in. As she stood in front of the crumbling gates, Sarah felt a strange sense of unease. The wrought iron fence creaked in the wind, and the overgrown ivy seemed to reach out like hands trying to pull her in. But Sarah wasn't afraid. She had always been intrigued by the paranormal and had spent years studying hauntings and ghost stories. She had to see it for herself. Sarah stepped inside, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of dead leaves. The asylum loomed above her, its Gothic architecture twisted and dark, as if it had once been alive but now stood dead, drained of all its color and warmth. The windows were shattered, allowing the wind to whistle through the empty halls. Inside, the air smelled musty, stale, and thick with the weight of abandonment. There was something else too, something colder, a presence that lingered just beyond her perception. She couldn't explain it, but she knew it was there. She pressed on. The hallways were narrow and winding, lined with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. Sarah's flashlight flickered as she moved deeper into the building. The walls seemed to close in around her, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. She glanced behind her, nothing. But when she turned back around, the hallway stretched further ahead than it should have. Something wasn't right. She continued to walk, the unsettling silence weighing heavily on her chest. The asylum was old, yes, but the stillness felt unnatural. Her footsteps echoed in the corridor, each one louder than the last. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she entered what appeared to be the former common room. Sarah felt a sudden coldness sweep over her, as if the temperature had dropped by several degrees in an instant. Her breath fogged in the air, and she instinctively wrapped her arms around herself. Then, she heard it. A faint sound at first, almost like a whisper. It was distant, but unmistakable. Sarah froze. The whispering grew louder, clearer, and more urgent. It sounded like a voice, multiple voices whispering in a language she couldn't understand. Her heart raced, her hands trembling as she gripped the flashlight. The air felt heavier, pressing in on her as if the building itself were alive, suffocating her with its presence. Suddenly, the whisper stopped. The room went silent. Then, a loud bang echoed from the far side of the room. Sarah spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The door at the far end of the room was swinging open slowly, as though someone had pushed it from the other side. She approached cautiously, her heart pounding. She reached for the door and pushed it open, only to find a dark staircase leading down into the basement. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the faintest sound of something dragging along the floor could be heard from the depths below. Against her better judgment, Sarah decided to go down. The stairs creaked under Sarah's weight as she descended into the basement. Each step seemed to echo through the empty space, the sounds reverberating unnervingly. The further she went, the darker it became. The flashlight's beam barely cut through the oppressive darkness. When she reached the bottom, she could feel the temperature drop even further. It was freezing now, the cold biting into her skin. The air smelled damp and rancid, like old mildew and rot. She turned her flashlight towards the walls, which were lined with old, rusted medical equipment. Broken syringes, cracked vials, and discarded instruments littered the floor. It was clear that this place had once been used for something far darker than Sarah could imagine. But that wasn't what drew her attention. At the far end of the basement was a heavy metal door, slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from inside. Sarah could hear movement coming from behind the door, a low, dragging sound, followed by a faint whisper. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even more. Sarah's breath was visible now, coming out in sharp, white bursts. She was about to turn away when the door creaked open on its own, revealing a dark room beyond. Inside the room, Sarah saw them. At first, she thought they were shadow shapes moving in the dark, but as her eyes adjusted, she realized they were much more than that. Figures, tall and thin, with dark, hollow eyes. They didn't move like normal people, they seemed to float, their limbs twitching unnaturally. They were staring at her, unmoving. But somehow, Sarah could feel their gaze cutting into her very soul. One of the figures stepped forward, its face emerging from the shadows. Its eyes were pitch black, voids of emptiness. A whispering voice filled the room. But it wasn't just coming from one figure, it was coming from all of them, in unison. "Leave this place." The words were soft at first, barely audible, but they repeated, growing louder with each repetition. "Leave this place, or you will be ours." Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Her knees buckling beneath her, she stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. The room was spinning, the shadows closing in on her. It was as if the figures were drawing nearer, pulling her into their world of darkness. With every ounce of strength she had left, Sarah turned and ran. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. The footsteps behind her were growing louder, and she could hear the whispers again, this time too close to ignore. She bolted up the stairs, the cold air biting into her skin as she ascended. The shadows seemed to chase her, whispering in her ear, growing louder with every step. Sarah reached the top of the stairs and ran through the hallways, her flashlight shaking in her hand. She could feel something behind her, something following her every move. The whispers were almost deafening now. She burst through the door of the asylum and into the night, gasping for air. The cold wind hit her face, and for a moment, she thought she was safe. But when she looked back at the asylum, she saw something that froze her in place. In the window, there were faces, hollow eyes staring back at her. The shadow people were watching her, and they weren't alone. More faces pressed against the glass, their pale, lifeless eyes filled with malice. As Sarah ran down the hill, she knew she had barely escaped, but she also knew something else. The asylum was not finished with her. It was watching her, waiting for the moment she would return. And one day, it would claim her. As Sarah's footsteps faded into the distance, the wind carried the whispers of the shadow people into the night, and the Windmere Asylum stood silently on the hill, its dark secret safe once again until the next curious soul dared to venture inside.